Today I would like to try and explain the dangers of cocaine to you objectively. As many of you probably know, cocaine produces a superlative high. That in itself is not a problem, but it is highly addictive, and if taken regularly, the consequences can be horrendous. However, the psychodynamics are a little complicated, so you must bear with me while I try to explain. In episode 6 of Puff of Smoke, I observed that human beings are born ignorant and have to learn to survive from the culture into which they are born. Toddlers explore the world in a frenzy, but by the age of 4, they become more cautious. They become aware that the world is bigger than they are, and they become frightened of the dark, for example, and aware of metaphysical fear. The majority only learn enough to survive in the immediate environment. It is this group that can easily become psychopathy, as it were, in the hands of dictators, world improvers, and such like. Although the mind can conceive of and dream to infinity, there are only 24 hours a day in which to do so. Moreover, the mind is situated in a body with finite physical functional limits. If those limits are exceeded, physical breakdown is inevitable. With finite physical limits, many dreams are doomed to frustration. It is ultimately our own bodies, rather than oppressive ideology, that limits individual liberty. Everyone has to learn to live with this fact, something that has been forgotten since the Cultural Revolution. This ability to dream to infinity gives an important minority, about 10% of the population, I believe, a powerful urge to seek knowledge beyond that needed for everyday survival. It is such people who've been responsible for the evolution of human culture. In 1969, I met William Burroughs, the American writer. He gave me a copy of The Teachings of Don Juan by Carlos Castaneda. It had been published earlier that year, and I was intrigued by the Native American wisdom it contained. To paraphrase the first passage that captured my imagination, Don Juan talked of the enemies of a man of knowledge. He said that there were 4 to be overcome by anyone seeking to acquire wisdom. It is perhaps clearer to see them as obstacles rather than enemies. When individuals start to learn, the scraps of knowledge they acquire appear unrelated and confusing. They find the quest for knowledge takes them to strange, difficult, and therefore frightening places. Fear builds up and is the first obstacle to acquiring knowledge. To overcome it, individuals must persevere and defy their fear. Then, quite suddenly, things that had been confusing start to make sense. A difficult passage in a book, for example, such as the I Ching, becomes clear. A new clarity of understanding is acquired that overcomes fear. But if people are taken in by it, if they allow this clarity to go to their heads, they stop doubting themselves and acquire an assurance which makes them feel they can do anything they please. They become bold and courageous. They will rush when they should be patient, or be patient when they should rush. They will become too busy to learn, and their quest for knowledge thwarted. Clarity becomes the second obstacle to acquiring wisdom. To overcome clarity, it must be defied just as fear was defied. It must be used only to broaden understanding. A moment will come when they realize that clarity has given them power. They think they can do whatever they please. They start by taking calculated risks and end up making rules. They do not know how or when to use their power. If they abandon themselves to it, they can become cruel, capricious, and dictatorial, seeking to control those about them. They will have been defeated by what Don Juan called the third enemy of a man of knowledge. But if people are only temporarily blinded by this power, and deliberately defy it as they defied fear and clarity, then they realize that this power is never really theirs. They realize they must still keep themselves in line at all times, handling carefully and faithfully all they have learned. They come to see that courage, clarity, and power without self-discipline are worthless. But then a fourth obstacle appears: it's old age. It cannot be overcome like fear, clarity, and power. It can only be defied by sloughing off an ever-increasing fatigue and lethargy. Among the cultures I studied, when I became an amateur anthropologist in the 70s, was that of those who regularly powdered their noses with cocaine. Cocaine increases self-confidence and makes people feel they're already the sort of people they would like to be. But it is highly addictive. Taken regularly, it enables people to defy their fears and become more sure of themselves. It then whisks them past the obstacles to knowledge. They then think they know more than they have learned. They think they can see the world clearly. This clarity overcomes any doubts they may have about their abilities. They behave as if they knew it all. They get carried away and abandon themselves to delusions of grandeur with scant regard for moral principle and the welfare of others. Cocaine abuse has become a way of life in the financial services industry over recent years. Some time ago, one such person in America came up with an idea and told his friends. They started selling mortgages to people who could not afford to repay, packaged the debt, sold it on, and pocketed the proceeds. Increasing numbers joined in and ultimately destroyed the banking system. It was a typical cocaine-inspired scam. Later in the teachings, Don Juan pointed out that there are many paths through life, and that it was important to choose what he called a path with heart. But there is no point in being on a path with heart if you then travel down it in the wrong direction. That is what has been happening since the Cultural Revolution. That lies at the root of many of our problems.